talk show where we serve you the most important meal of the day.
That's right. We are serving success strategies and system side dishes each Saturday here on Synergy Radio 1480 AM.
So grab your coffee and your croissant and let's get down to business. We are your business breakfast host. I am Tiffany A. Washington.
And I am Joy Hutton Lacey. Today we are going to be talking about nonprofits.
Okay, but Joy, this is the business breakfast talk show.
Absolutely. But nonprofits should also run like a traditional business.
Okay.
There are common misconceptions that they should operate differently, and the biggest difference is that they are non-exempt. So let's get into exactly what a nonprofit is and the history of this entity.
Yeah.
And then we will be joined later by the wonderful, amazing, beautiful Larica Monique, who will talk to us about fundraising and building a donor base, which is critical to running a nonprofit.
So the modern nonprofit says that nonprofits are critically different from corporations because they're driven by a mission, and an aim to provide society's needs. Nonprofits are organizations that have a social impact. Mm-hmm. So that's what we want people to hone in on today. So is your nonprofit having a social impact?
Absolutely.
Right.
However, all corporations, whether for-profit or not, need to solve a problem and create value for others.
Right.
And this value created could be a product or service for potential customers as seen in the realm of business.
Right. So it can be value in the form of programs and services that benefit hungry children. Mm-hmm. Those nonprofits can also put a stop to the mistreatment of animals or preserve the environment. Absolutely. As addressed by the work of nonprofit organizations. But from the donor's perspective, their purchase of investment in a nonprofit's work results in the gratification of being part of the solution to a societal problem.
That's a mouthful, too.
That is a whole mouthful. So essentially, if you want me to break it down, what I really mean is that like your work has to address problems that people need solutions for.
Absolutely.
And that's what you want to focus on with your nonprofits. But Joy, before we get any further into this, I want to highlight the fact that this is part of the work that you do every day.
Absolutely.
So Joy is the nonprofit guru, if you will. She works with a lot of nonprofits behind the scenes, and I just wanted to highlight that because I wanted to qualify this show with the fact that we each have our own lanes of expertise, and this in particular is one of Joy's areas of expertise. Yes. So Joy, let's get into some of the common misconceptions about nonprofits.
Absolutely, and there are so many.
Yeah.
People think that nonprofits, because it's called a nonprofit, that they can't earn a profit, but that's absolutely incorrect.
Right.
People think that nonprofits don't make money because they're small, but, we see large nonprofits out there. Being a 501c3 does not ban an organization from making money.
Right.
It simply means that all profits go towards their mission and purpose and growing the organization. And a nonprofit actually cannot live or function without profit.
Yes.
Because they wouldn't be able to run the programs and activities which create the social impact, which you mentioned. And although some nonprofits struggle with funding, including many of the organizations I've worked for, there are countless nonprofits who have no money problems whatsoever. The NFL is a nonprofit.
Yes.
The New York Stock Exchange is a nonprofit. I mean, those are huge nonprofits that clearly are making a lot of money.
Yeah, and so those were two little nuggets that are little known facts, especially with the New York Stock Exchange.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so, another misconception is that a well-run nonprofit should have low overhead costs. That's not true. If we look at some of these larger nonprofits, they have tons of executives, tons of staff, so you have a lot of administrative costs that you have. So you have to build that into your budget. Some people think nonprofits don't have a paid staff. We can run solely on volunteers. Okay.
Let's pause on that one. Put a pin in that one. Let's talk about that a little bit more in depth, because I think there is a misconception about how nonprofits should be run, but you can't run a business without having people in there who are qualified.
Right.
And volunteers aren't always qualified to do this work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Qualified, and not only that, when you just keep people on as volunteers, they're only going to stay with you for so long.
Exactly.
Because I need to get paid at some point.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to be a lifelong volunteer unless you just have nothing to do with yourself.
Yeah.
Or unless that's the commitment that you made to the organization. But you cannot have a nonprofit and have the expectation that you're going to run solely as a volunteer-run organization.
Well, it sounds like one of the things that you'll run into is accountability, because with volunteers, they could arrive late and there are no repercussions for it.
Right.
They can do things that are out of order, but if you're solely focusing on just having volunteers run your business, you will run your business into the ground.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And other common misconceptions is that nonprofits can't lobby. However, that's not true. You know, there are certain initiatives where executives from nonprofits go to Capitol Hill and lobby for different issues. You know, there's autism awareness, different breast cancer, different things where, you know, you want to change policies around what your cause is.
Right.
There's a common misconception that nonprofits get most of their funding from foundations.
Oh, so tell me, we're going to dig deeper into this later today.
We'll definitely get into that.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's true. People think, oh, I'm going to get grants and I'm going to run my nonprofit. No, like that's not going to work. You know, you have to have a network of people that will help you raise money, and we'll talk more about this later. And then there's a misconception that charitable giving incentives only benefit wealthy people. Listen, if I gave $20 to an organization, I'm writing that off of my taxes.
Absolutely.
And I'm not wealthy by any means.
Yes.
Not yet.
Yes, I love that. Yes.
But people think that, and it doesn't just benefit wealthy people. Now, nonprofits were traditionally started because wealthy people needed to put their money somewhere.
Oh, you know, that is a touchy subject, Joy, because if we really wanted to dig deep into some of the social inequities and social injustice, that'll probably be a good show for us. But I won't, I'll just scratch the surface of that right now. I won't dig deep into that.
Exactly. Yeah. There's an assumption that most nonprofits are large and have many resources, but that's definitely not true. And because you have so many nonprofits, and I'm going to break down those numbers in just a moment. But you know, and some people think that if you see a specific need, that you just need to start a nonprofit.
Yeah, don't just start something because you think that, oh, that's the way to go, because you have to have a strategic plan in place, right? And that's something that our guest later on today is also going to talk with us a little bit about.
And, you know, sometimes it's great to start a nonprofit for a cause, but, you know, it shouldn't be established as a hobby, you know, especially if you plan to raise funds for this organization. Now, if you don't want to raise any funds, then, you know, don't start an organization. You should also never establish a nonprofit to give yourself a paying job as a director, just so you can say, I need a job.
You know what? But isn't that one of the perks of running a nonprofit?
I mean, that's a perk if your nonprofit is bringing in money, but don't make that your sole purpose, because you might be sadly disappointed.
Right.
But while there is a widespread shortage of funding in the nonprofit sector, there is no shortage of nonprofits themselves.
Yes.
In Houston alone, there are over 3,000 nonprofits just in Houston.
Wow.
And the National Center for Charitable Statistics reports that there were over 1.4 million registered nonprofit organizations in 2012. Did you hear me? 1.4 million.
1.4 million.
1.4 million. And that is over two-thirds of those nonprofits were actually 501c3s, because there are definitely different categories for that.
Right.
And of those, roughly 1 million, fewer than 3,000 reported revenues exceeding $100,000.
Say that statistic again.
So 1 million of those registered in 2012, fewer than 300,000 reported revenues exceeding $100,000.
So less than a third of them.
Yes. So that means they're not bringing in a lot of money.
Yeah, and so that really lets you also know how saturated the market is, one, and then two, how tough it might be
Yes.
for you to get funds inside
Yes.
of your organization.
Absolutely. So we will finish up talking about some of the misconceptions and getting right into this nonprofit conversation when we get back.
We are discussing all things nonprofit. Before we get back into things, I just wanted to take a moment to shout out our live viewers. Thank you, Sanitra, Tristan, Jacqueline, Jolia, and Sharita Clark. Good morning.
Good
Thank you all for being here with us this morning.
Yes. So we were talking about common misconceptions, and we left off talking about how many nonprofits there actually are registered.
Yeah.
You know, over 1.4 million. And like I said, in Houston alone, there are over 3,000. So just imagine competing against all these nonprofits. And people always complain about the big nonprofits getting money, but they have an established presence.
Right.
And you also have to think about, is your cause unique? And we'll get more into that. But if you see a charitable need unfulfilled in your community, first, it's best to figure out which existing provider may have a mission that could allow that need to be met within that existing community. And then also, you know, setting up competing smaller nonprofits without the ability to actually pay for it creates a lot of problems. And so you have to raise money so that you can make a significant impact.
Right. So it sounds like you have to have your own personal social responsibility as far as making connections and networking before you consider jumping into a nonprofit, because you do have to have some sort of baseline in order to start out being successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So some of the things, you know, to think about when you, or before you start a nonprofit, you need to understand the unique aspects of the nonprofit organizations. You know, there are so many intricacies of a nonprofit organization. People just think, oh, it's tax exempt, I'm going to get grants. There's more to it than that. You know, you need to understand state and federal regulatory issues as relates to nonprofits, because funds need to be raised and legal requirements need to be followed.
Right. And the other piece of that is you can't just up one day and search for grants and start writing them. There are people who do this for a living, grant writers. And if that is not your calling, then that's not a piece that you want to delve in. So this is not something that you want to bootstrap, because I talk about bootstrapping a lot in our episodes, but this is definitely not something that you want to undertake by yourself.
It's not. And just like you have to have a plan in place for a traditional business, you also have to have a plan in place for a nonprofit.
Absolutely.
You know, when you're seeking business loans, you're seeking grants, or you're seeking other types of funding for a nonprofit. So you have to think about that. Make a plan. You also need to understand, do you have the leadership skills and characteristics to run a nonprofit? Same as if you have the actual qualities to be an entrepreneur. It's the same thing. Can you communicate your passion to others? Can you give them the story behind why you want to start this nonprofit and inspire them to actually participate in your vision?
And so let's put a pin right there. Because that's another skill you have to have, especially if you're thinking about being the face of the nonprofit. If you're going to be the face of your nonprofit, you definitely want to make sure that you can speak eloquently to the mission and to the vision, and that you also have a certain level of charisma, and that you can sustain that across the life of the nonprofit.
Yes. And then once you do that, are you prepared to take the initiative to get things started? Are you prepared to do the work that it requires? Because folks, I'm going to tell you, it is not easy running a nonprofit. You know, it takes responsibilities to keep the operations running and growing. You know, you have to be able to communicate your purpose, passion, you know, the plan. You know, we talked about pitches in the business sense, but you have to have one for your nonprofit too. You can't just be like, I want to save the world.
You know what? It's great that we want to save the world, but I think we get into this a little bit later. When you're trying to figure out what your purpose is and what your passion is, the time to figure it out is not while you're building that nonprofit, it's prior to. So there is some deep work that has to happen in order for you to figure out, what is it that I'm truly passionate about? And then how is that passion helping to fulfill that need on top of everything else? Because if it's not serving a purpose and if it's not going to impact others, then it's probably not a good start for your
Absolutely,
nonprofit.
absolutely. And so, and having people that can back you,
Right.
because if nobody believes in your cause, guess what? You're not raising any money. So
And that's the most important
need
factor.
some believers,
Yes.
some believers. So, we talked about things to think about before starting the nonprofit, but you also have to think about, okay, there are reasons why you should start a nonprofit, and there are reasons why you should not.
Yes.
Start a nonprofit. We always give you all the real.
Yes.
So I'm going to go into reasons not to start a nonprofit.
Let's do it.
So as we talked about this unique need, there's already an organization filling that need, or there may be 10,000 organizations filling that need.
Right. So don't start another closed drive nonprofit.
Yes. Exactly.
Because there's so many of them out there already.
Exactly.
You need to do your research. Yeah.
Or make it unique and have something that makes you stand out. But you really have to do your research on what that is.
Right.
So, I believe in, having a cause, but make sure it's not a whole bunch of other people doing it.
Right.
You also, as I said, you have to have people on board. You have to have a tribe.
Right.
Okay, because somebody is going to need to help you raise funds. At some point, you need to establish a board of directors. And so, setting up and running a nonprofit takes a lot of people. And so you need to be focused on a single vision and mission. And if you're on your own, it's just not going to work.
So, Joy, would you say that starting a nonprofit might be an entrepreneur's best bet after they've already started their business and they've grown a tribe, and some of those people may be able to transfer over into that nonprofit arena? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it could be, or there are a number of ways you can structure it, because sometimes a nonprofit may be suited to be a for-profit, for example. So, but just like you have to build a network for your business, you have to do the same thing in the nonprofit space.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of a good segue into, what I was saying about making a for-profit enterprise. Well, maybe you can just incorporate philanthropic giving into your for-profit. Yeah. But we actually have a show on that next week, guys, so you're just going to have to hold out.
Oh, and we have a great guest coming up next week as well.
Yes,
so
we do.
Hold tight for that
news. And thinking about, you're still in that startup mentality when you have a nonprofit. You have to start from the ground up, and that takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, like, oh, I'm just going to get this federal grant and then we're going to have $1 million. It doesn't work that way. Your cause may be difficult to secure long-term funding. Right. Someone may only want to support you during the holidays. Maybe you're only doing giveaways, meal giveaways, for example. You have to think about your long-term strategic plan. Right. That strategic plan is like your business plan for a business. So you really have to think about those things. So I know I gave you all the negatives, but let's think about some of the positives, reasons why you should start a nonprofit.
So before you dig into that, I just wanted to let our listeners know that we do see your comments, and we know that you're listening. So if you have any questions, go ahead and get those questions into our Facebook Live chat so that we can answer those questions in real time. So I'm sure that you're finding value in this information, but we want to make sure that if you need any clarity on anything, that we're able to give it to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned social impact before. I'd like you to go ahead and tackle that for me. And then we'll go into reasons to start a nonprofit.
So, before we get into reasons to start a nonprofit, I want to talk about something that Fast Company shared with us. Fast Company classifies nonprofits as social impact organizations, which take away some of the stigma behind nonprofits being looked at as institutions that lack finances. And Fast Company also highlights that profit doesn't have to be limited to financial gain. In other words, when operating inside of a nonprofit, you must also consider other factors and outcomes that are profitable.
Absolutely.
So from there, you can start to analyze your why and what are you doing to provide the community and the world something by starting a social impact organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when we think about reasons to start a nonprofit, first you need to think about that particular definition of social impact.
And again, what social impact are you going to have on your community,
Right.
and what is driving you to make that social impact. Right.
Exactly.
You know, and just like identifying a business problem, what problem are you solving in your nonprofit? Because if you're not solving a real problem, guess what? You're not going to get real money. Not happening. So, you know, and do you have skills, or do you have people to put in place to help you solve that problem?
Right.
Because we can come up with problems all day, but guess what? I'm not trying to solve every problem in the world because I don't have the expertise in that area.
Right. And, you know, some people don't understand the process of building out a niche.
Yes.
And sometimes you have to pare it down to something so granular that you're actually specifying what it is that you're doing at a very minute level, and that can be big and it can explode for you.
Yes.
But you can't cure all of the problems of the world, like you were saying.
Right.
You have to pare it down.
Absolutely. And being passionate about that work is necessary. Same thing as being an entrepreneur. If you're not doing something that you like to do, it probably is not going to yield you a return on your investment. So you really need to make sure that you're passionate about that. One of the things that's great about nonprofits is it's easy to start one. Just like it's easy to start a business, but can you run it is the question. So, you know, and then, you know, we joked about paying yourself, but this could essentially turn into a full-time job versus a hobby. So that is something to think about, because you can change your hobby into a full-time job and really dedicate your life to working on something that you believe in.
Right, that's definitely a benefit. So there's some questions that we want our audience to consider when you're thinking about the why you're going to start this particular nonprofit. And one of them is the social impact, as we discussed. What type of impact do you want to make? But also, what is driving you to make that particular social impact? What is what is making your gears turn behind saying, I really think I want to tackle this issue? And also, is there a problem that you want to solve? Okay, you have to want to do it, not just because it exists. That doesn't mean that you automatically fit yourself into that particular peg.
Right. And then also considering, you know, what doors a nonprofit can open for you. You know, when you have a nonprofit, there is an opportunity to get connected in a number of different spaces. So this is a networking opportunity. But don't start a nonprofit for the wrong reasons. You know, most importantly, you know, the thing to consider when wanting to start a nonprofit is that you are making a difference.
Yes. And I think that's the thing that makes us feel good on the inside, that we're making a difference. But in the midst of making a difference, we have to remember that it's tough. It's tough to make a difference. So once you've decided you want to start a nonprofit, there's a checklist that we want to share with you. But we're going to share that with you when we come back.
And we'll be back with Larica Monique.
Yes.
Are back, and we are here with Larica Monique.
Hi, Joy. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, Larica.
We are so happy to have you here with us. And before we get started, we were leaving off with this nonprofit checklist. So I'm going to run through this really quickly, and then I want you to tell us all the wonderful things about you.
Absolutely.
So we have this nonprofit checklist, just a brief checklist, you know, and there are resources out there for you all that we'll talk about. But some of the things to really get into is, you know, you just like a business, you want to create a unique name, create a pitch, select a board of directors, not just your friends.
Yes,
because
not
if your
just
friends
your friends
don't have any money or don't know how to fundraise, please don't put them on your board.
And also if they don't have any interest.
Yes.
One of the common things that happens is we try to depend on our friends for everything to start supporting us, and they're not always the right fit.
Yes.
And so don't get offended if they don't want to do it either.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And people need to be honest about not being
Absolutely.
on boards either, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yes.
File the proper organizational documents and tax registrations. Establish a fundraising plan for your nonprofit, and understand the intricacies of grant writing. That's a beast within itself. Develop critical business functions and operations. You need to define roles and responsibilities with your staff of a nonprofit, and you need to decide, you know, when you're starting out, are you going to have paid staff or volunteers, and how long are you going to keep those volunteers on, and what does the training look like for them, and how do you retain volunteers going forward? So we have and I forgot establishing a budget, because that's important.
Yeah, don't forget that.
Establishing a budget and remaining compliant. I just want to make sure you get all this goodness from Larica, so I wanted to run through that list really, really quickly, but remaining compliant as well, because people think, oh, I filed it, now I'm just going to go out here and save the world. No, you have to be compliant. So, Larica, please tell us about yourself, because you know this nonprofit space very well, but I want you to share with us who you are.
Thank you guys for inviting me this morning. And so I started my career on the development side of nonprofits, and then I quickly learned that there were many individuals and small businesses who are looking to give back, and they don't know where to give back to or how to give back. And so I've been spending the past couple of years really focusing on that individual and that small business and really pairing them with hidden gems in our community.
Yes.
We know about the Houston Food Bank. We know about DePelchin. We know about the Children's Museum.
Right.
But do we know about Career Gear? Do we know about the Fifth Ward Enrichment Program?
Yes.
And there are hidden gems in our community that are really doing great work that donors are looking for to give back to.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so tell us a little bit more about how you came into the nonprofit space.
Oh my goodness. So I started my career as a classroom teacher.
Yes.
I was a math
teachers.
science teacher.
Yay!
And it was during the time, I don't know if you guys, I might be aging myself, the No Child
Probably
Left
not.
Behind.
Oh, yeah,
Act came
NCLB.
into play.
Yes.
Yes.
And so there were, athletics were less important, or the funding was being shifted.
Yes.
And so as a not a football coach, my goodness, I'm thinking about football. It's Saturday morning. As a volleyball coach, a track coach, and a basketball coach, I had to seek funding for my program.
Wow.
And so I started very grassroots and going in the community and looking for companies and businesses to help fill that gap.
Right.
And quickly I learned that, hey, I'm good at this.
Yeah.
And so how can I connect those with a need with those looking to serve that need?
Yeah.
That's how I started, very grassroots several years ago.
Awesome. Okay. And that's kind of a good segue into our first question is, if someone is just starting out and building their nonprofit, where should they start with funding? You mentioned grassroots, going to the community. What are some of the things they should start off doing?
You know, Joy, one of the things that I share with nonprofits is that, and I'm not going to sound like a negative Nelly, but 75% of them fail.
Yeah.
And it's because of the lack of vision, the duplication of services, the lack of capacity, and poor leadership.
Yes.
Ooh.
And
absolutely.
so the question that I ask most nonprofits when they're looking to begin their nonprofit is your vision clear?
Yeah.
Do you have the right leadership? And I heard you mention earlier, it's not always going to be your family. Your family and friends are not always the best people to serve on your board, because you need individuals that can help you from a capacity perspective, time, talent, and treasures.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Of
like
course,
that.
I like to talk about the treasures aspect.
Exactly.
And also, are you duplicating something that this community is already doing well? Can your program help advance the cause of something else?
So there's a question on our Facebook Live, and it asks, how do you determine what salary you should and or will be paid? Is it okay to ask that question about salaries now? Is that a touchy subject in the nonprofit world?
It is not a touchy subject to me at all. I actually like to have this conversation because as a nonprofit or fundraising is a profession.
Yes.
And it's just like having being a CPA. You actually can get credentials as a fundraising professional, as an executive director, as someone leading a nonprofit organization. And so I like to say that in most cases, executive directors make about 10%. Development professionals make about 8%. And those in programs or operating programs, it tends to 6 to 7% of the overall budget. It's a pretty good formula, and it typically works that way.
Right. Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something to consider. One of our viewers had asked that question. So I mentioned earlier establishing a budget. Just like a business, you have to have a budget. How much are your programs going to cost?
Absolutely.
Because your programs are the bulk of what you're doing. That's why you started the nonprofit in the first place. You're delivering a product and service to the people.
Absolutely.
So what advice can you give about building a donor base? You know, you mentioned, you know, family and friends can be supportive to a certain extent, but how do you build and manage that donor base?
Building a donor base. So I am going to just give percentages of what nonprofit revenues should look like.
Okay.
75% should come from individuals.
Ooh, that's a large amount.
Chew on that.
Yeah.
4% from corporations.
Yes.
13% from foundations, and 8% from other.
Yes.
And so typically when most nonprofits are seeking funding, they're looking for corporate opportunities, they're looking for foundation opportunities, opportunities to write grants, but the money or the gem is really hidden in individual giving.
Yes, it is.
I looked up some numbers this morning, and I just wanted to make sure that we understood what that number looks like. $390 billion was given last year from individuals.
Wow.
Whereas only $58 billion was given by corporations.
Yeah.
And so it's so important to understand that in nonprofit giving, the money comes from the individuals. Yes. People are connected to people they know, like, and trust.
Yes.
If you know, like, and trust me, and you believe in my cause, and I can show you the impact, then you're going to contribute to my cause. And so I really try to impress on organizations and nonprofits the importance of doing the work within the community and connecting with individuals outside, maybe outside of your community, but we're all one person away from that donor that we need.
Right.
What I like to do is often prospect. So it's kind of being very intentional about who I'm going to ask for donors.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, it was this one guy that I put on my prospect list, and I really needed to know him because I knew that he had the capacity to serve.
Right.
And so somehow, some way, I continued to attend a couple of networking events, and I would, hi, how are you? He was busy.
Right.
Fast forward now, let's say 6 years, he supports almost every cause that I'm a part of.
Wow,
and it's a very,
that's
it's a blessing to be able to know that I have an individual that's connected, that has the capacity, his friends have the capacity. And so they're serving, he's serving, and I'm helping to advance the cause of many nonprofits in our community.
And you built those relationships.
I built the relationship.
You know, and that's the thing. You have to build relationships. You have to build a network.
And that's a strategy in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Learning how to network so that you can. And we talked about that on one of our other episodes, just making sure that you have a plan. If you know somebody is going to be there that you need to be connected with, then you need to make it your business to be in those spaces.
And that's kind of a good segue, because if you do not consider yourself to be a salesperson, how do you make that ask? You know, how do you go after those donors for money? Because it's like, oh, I need it, but I don't want to ask. But you have to.
Right.
I think it's important to reflect on why.
Why
you're doing what you're doing. And remember, it's not about you.
Yes.
Most of us are raising funds or working in the nonprofit sector because of some cause that we're trying to support, whether it's children, veterans, seniors, or animals. And so I don't make it about me. I make it about the person that we're looking to serve. When I go out to ask for an investment, and that's what I typically say. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable to say, may I please have money? But it makes it, you feel better by asking someone to make an investment in a cause. And so get over yourself, because it's not about you. And not to sound curt, but it's not about you. It's about the cause that you are looking to advance. Does that help?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So when thinking about the financial goals of a nonprofit, you know, do you have a formula for that? You know, how many fundraisers should we do? How many capital campaigns? You know, because everybody thinks they have to do a gala. No, you know, you don't have to do a gala. But you know, and so
actually galas are expensive.
They are expensive, and so
but they can be.
Yeah, they're expensive, but you better get a return on your investment. You know, if you're doing a gala. So what would you say in terms of thinking about the fundraising goals and then how to map that out?
We're probably talking to your smaller to mid-sized nonprofits. I would not say that your larger nonprofits have it figured out.
Right.
But they are running a well-oiled machine, and so they've already developed and created a solution that works really well for them.
Right.
And so I'm going to speak towards your startup or your smaller nonprofit organizations. I would say always to look at your leadership. And so take a peek at your board of directors and make sure that you understand what their objectives are, what their giving functions are, what their involvement with programs are. And if they're not able to help you raise funds, number one, your organization is not really creating a step of sustainability.
Absolutely.
And then the next step is, okay, let's have a little ingenuity. So maybe our board of directors is not, but is there space to create an advisory board so you can look for those individuals that truly have the capacity to give?
Yes.
Because, of course, I'm a proponent of individual giving, and I do understand that there is a funding stream that most of us hear about called foundations and grant writing, and grant writing is a special niche.
Yes, and we're
And
going to
not-
talk about that. Please, that's an important one. No, we're going to get into that. When we get back, guys, we are getting into this nonprofit space. We are back here with Larica Monique, and she is giving us all the goods in the nonprofit space.
Yes.
And so just before we had to go to commercial break, Larica, you were talking about grants and grant writing. Please pick back up on that, because that is so important. I really don't think when people start a nonprofit, they truly understand the grant space.
Correct. So the grant space is a very interesting space. There are two different segments. There's the federated, which are the federal. They fall under your state, your county, your city opportunities. And then there are those community foundation opportunities. And typically when people hear grant, they hear free.
Yes.
For free. And yes, while it is for free, it's not for free for everyone.
Exactly.
And so most nonprofit grantors are looking for nonprofit organizations that have been established for a minimum of 3 to 5 years.
Yes.
And so if you have not been established for 3 to 5 years, it makes it difficult, not impossible, to be able to seek funding for those opportunities that are here in the community. And then let's talk a little bit about the skill sets.
Yes. Oh, yes. Ooh, yes.
A skill set is required and necessary for grant writing. You have to understand how to package the grant, how to answer the questions, how to tell the story, how to define the need, the solution, the opportunity. And most folks that write grants are trained to be able to package those grant proposals.
Absolutely.
And so what I like to share with everyone, and how grants were packaged 20 years ago is not the same how they're being packaged today. Today, funders really want you to be able to share your story in 2 to 3 pages or less. They're not looking for extra information or photos and one-pagers to accompany the grants. They really want you to get down to telling the story, showing the impact, and ask what you're funding, the funding that you're seeking.
Right. Are you all listening to this? Are you all listening to this?
Post those questions.
Larica is preaching. Okay, but it's so important. And so when thinking about hiring a fundraising consultant, what are some questions you should ask? What are some things that you should consider? And what can a fundraising consultant actually help you do?
Some of the questions I would ask when trying to or hoping to hire a fundraising consultant is, number one, what organizations have you worked for, and who do you have a relationship with? I think I mentioned earlier, people give to people they know, like, and trust.
Yes.
One of the advantage points that I have as a fundraising professional is that with the community foundations or those within the community that are giving, I call them. So let's say Joy, if you worked for Joy Consulting or Foundation, I would contact you, Joy. Hi, it's Larica. I'm just checking in. Let's go out for coffee. So I'm building a direct relationship with those that are funding nonprofit organizations. With the lack of relationships and the lack of skill set, the likelihood of that fundraising consultant being able to really do something for your organization is very slim. And then the second part of that is, when you make a decision to hire them, understand this is a profession.
Yes.
I get quite a few requests, and people are questioning, my ability to do my job.
Right.
and I might spell out my resume to them.
Right.
But because they've experienced individuals that cannot deliver
Yes.
a product, it makes it very difficult. And so maybe seek out the referrals or the references from that particular fundraising professional to ensure that they're able to deliver what they say that they can deliver.
Absolutely.
Does that help?
Oh, yes. Yes. So what are some other final thoughts? Well, first of all, speaking of fundraising consultants, where can people find you?
People can find me at laricamonique.com and preferably to email me at pr@laricamonique.com.
Okay.
That's how to find me. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you
want
for
people to
that
call
plug.
you. Yes. That's what it's all about. We want people to do it the right way. You know,
Yes.
starting a nonprofit, starting a business, you have to go about things the right way. And some people don't want to pay, but then they'll pay for it later.
Correct.
You know.
Either
And things to really think about, you know, things to stay away from, you know, maybe in the nonprofit space.
Well, you know, I'm all about reigning.
Yeah.
And so everything that I talk about it goes along with the acronym of reigning. And so one, I'll close with these thoughts. Is one, remember why you started your nonprofit organization. If you do have the passion and you have the capacity and you have the team behind you to help move your cause forward, then move forward.
Right.
E is embrace your uniqueness. And so understand whether you are duplicating a need or you're actually advancing a need. And if you are advancing something that you know you're purposed with doing, embrace it and move forward. The I would be to invest. It goes back to looking for those individuals that have the unique skill set to be able to help move your cause in the direction of which you're trying to go. You cannot do this alone. So many people start nonprofits and they try to advance this cause by themselves. You cannot do this. This is one of those.
Like business owners, just like business owners,
Exactly.
you cannot do
This is not a solopreneur.
Yes.
And I like to share that if I'm not an expert, I'd rather just pay because speed matters.
Right.
Speed really does matter.
done.
What will take me a year to develop could probably take someone that's an expert a couple of months to move forward. And so I stand behind investing in yourself as a nonprofit. G is give. Make sure that you are giving to your clients everything that they need to be sustainable, to put them on their feet. Whatever your cause is, you need to make sure that you're showing that impact in the community. And then N would be next. Have a strategic plan and a strategic vision about what year 2 is going to look like, what year 3 is going to look like, what year 5 is going to look like. You really need to set yourself up for sustainability in the future.
Absolutely.
So those are my thoughts. You reign.
I love that. I love that.
No, we have had an absolutely amazing guest in Larica today. We have a few final thoughts. Joy, why don't you share with us what the final thoughts are for this morning?
So we all touched on this, but you know, existing organizations, particularly those that rely on outside funding in the form of donations and grants, are already competing for scarce dollars. Many of them are struggling to survive, let alone thrive. And as we've seen in recent years, as funding declines, demand for the services that organizations provide frequently increases as well, which further challenges nonprofits that are already resource constrained. So adding more organizations to the mix is probably counterproductive. So really thinking about, is starting a nonprofit for you? And if you have done your research, you have done your plan, then go for it. Or consider adding a philanthropic arm to your business, or being on a board, or volunteering.
All of those.
And, you know, with a philanthropic arm, we will talk about social enterprises next week with Tyrone Smith, who is formerly of the San Francisco 49ers. So we love talking to you, Larica, and we want to have you back on here because there's so much great information.
We want to thank you all for tuning in to the Business Breakfast Talk Show, your most important meal of the day. Don't forget to share our video as well as like our Facebook page, The Business Breakfast Talk Show. If you have a question you want answered, or you're seeking to partner with us through sponsorship, or you want your business highlighted on our show, then just email us at breakfast@synergyradionetwork.com. We'll see you next week.
Breakfast is served. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love this station.
This is Mayor Sylvester Turner. The great Dr. King said the measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but at times of challenge and controversy. That's the measure of a city, too. And as we dig out from Hurricane Harvey, I am proud to be a Houstonian. That's why I'm asking you to go vote on Election Day this Tuesday. And please vote for all of the city bonds A through E. Proposition A is the final piece of the solution to the pension crisis. It protects retirement plans for our police officers, firefighters, and city workers. Propositions B, C, D, and E repair police and fire stations, parks and libraries, and health clinics. We can focus on rebuilding our city without raising taxes. Please join me by voting for all of the city bonds propositions.